This is very important. If you have a mailbox where your mail is delivered, I used to call it a letterbox because that's what I was brought up with in England, was a letterbox. I had never seen one of these before until I came to Southern California. Because in England, the way the postman delivers the post or the mail is by pushing it through a flap carved out of your front door, and it lands where? Inside your locked front door. And I'll never forget the first time my wife and I put an offer on our first house in Penasquitos. I walked out onto the street and I looked at this wooden post with 4 tin cans on it. And I said, darling, what are these? She said, well, she laughed. She said, well, those are the mailboxes. And then I started playing with the flap. I said, well, what are they supposed to do? She said, well, that's where our mail gets delivered. I said, you're kidding. So I'm saying, you mean while I'm downtown in court prosecuting crooks, my local Penasquitos crook is driving around my neighborhood and stealing my mail out of my unlocked mailbox at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? I said, that's not going to happen. So we quit using the mailbox and we instead got a P.O. box. I love a P.O. box because, as Jim knows, there are times when we upset a lot of people in our profession, and there's a lot of people who don't particularly like us. And so whenever people try to find out where I live, I can always say, I live in a box. It really feels very comforting. So I always tell people, if you have mobility and you have an unlocked mailbox, quit using your mailbox. Get a US post office mailbox instead. And they are cheap. You think they're not expensive. Now, if you go to a Mailbox Etc. or something like a Postal Annex, they're more expensive. But if you go to the United States Post Office, every lobby has mailboxes. They're only like $28 for 6 months. It's a bargain, and I love it. Oh, and I mentioned here collecting your checkbooks. The next time you are about to run out of checks, and you know there's that order form that you fill out, can you do me a favor? 2 things. Number one, could you tell your bank or your credit union that you only want to put your first initial and your last name on your checks? Nothing else. Don't put your address on there. Don't put your phone number. Nothing else. Just your first initial and your last name. And when you're in Albertsons and you happen to be writing out a check for your produce and they ask you for your phone number, just give them mine, okay? That's fine. So the reason that less information is on your checks is because whoever reads it, I mean, they still have our account number and they have your first and last name, but they don't have any more than that, and that's helpful when they don't have too much information. So the other thing I would ask you to do is pick up your checks from your bank or your credit union. I've had several situations in which the checkbook box has never arrived at the person's front door. Have you noticed in the last 5 to 10 years that these couriers services are getting very lazy? And instead of waiting for you to open your door, what do? They ring the doorbell, they throw it onto the doorstep, and they run as quickly as they can. My wife turned, I won't say what age she was, but she had a birthday on July the 3rd. It was a Friday. We were on holiday. It was a special, because it was the Friday of July 4th, the courts were closed. So I took her out for the day. My son in San Francisco sent her a parcel by FedEx. Beautiful gift, stolen off the front doorstep. These crooks are following the FedEx vans around. So don't leave anything to chance. If you have to send something by FedEx, always demand a signature. Okay? Don't do what my son did and not ask for a signature. In the old days, if you weren't home, what did they used to do? Leave you a card saying, pick it up from the warehouse, right? And that was great, but no more. They'll leave it on the doorstep, and then the crook will come and steal it. So don't leave your checkbooks to chance to be stolen. So rent a P.O. box.